Good morning.
Good morning, Rotarians and guests. Welcome to the Rotary Club of Hudson. I'm Ron Strobel, the Sergeant at Arms. Our invocation this morning is by Mimi Becker.
Okay. This is something that I was looking at and I thought we're in big trouble from Hudson to the planet. And so I went back and I looked at this and it's from a little booklet called Earth Prayers from Around the World. And I thought it would be appropriate for where we are today. And its title is Let Us Survive in Peace and Harmony. Let there be peace, welfare, and righteousness in every part of the world. Let confidence and friendship prevail. Let good of East and West, for the good of the needy South, for the good of all humanity. Let people inspire their leaders, helping them to seek peace by peaceful means, helping them and urging them to build a better world, a world with a home for everybody, a world with food and work for everybody, a world with spiritual freedom for everybody. Let those who have the power of money be motivated by selfless compassion. Let money become a tool for the good of humankind. Let those who have power deal respectfully with the resources of the planet. Let them respect and maintain the purity of air, water, land, and subsoil. Let them cooperate to restore the peace and health of Mother Earth. So be it.
Thank you, Mimi. And now to lead us in the pledge and the four-way test, Barbara Marshall.
Please join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And of the things that we say, think, and do, number one, is it truth? Number two, is it fair to all concerned? Number three, will it build goodwill and better friendships? And number four, will it be beneficial to all concerned?
Thank you, Barbara. Okay. To lead us in song, Chris Barker.
Good morning, everyone. If you'd please join me in singing My Country 'Tis of Thee. My country 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride, from every mountainside, let freedom ring. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Chris. And now our president, Terry Bortnick.
Well, you know, Lila just smiled at people and they came over. Good morning, everybody. I think our Red Kettle campaign is off to a great start. I know my granddaughter and I were there last night. I know Mr. Strobel was there, and we had great success. I think we do still have one opening on Saturday, the 4 to 6 shift. So if somebody could step up and take that, that would be wonderful, because we don't want to leave a Saturday afternoon open. Again, it's Saturday 4 to 6. I don't know how it could be November 15th, the week before Thanksgiving already, but it is. So next week we will have no meeting, 22nd. Go get where you're going for your holiday and enjoy your family and enjoy your day. I understand that the Pints for Polio was a good success. Excellent, excellent. Yeah. Oh, good. That's always a good thing. So as long as you have somebody drive you home. The fall fundraiser is in full force. Mr. Warfield's going to speak to us about that a moment.
Okay, thank you. I started a new sheet for the fall fundraiser. The first sheet is full, so I'm gonna recirculate this around again. Currently, we are at 35 popcorns, Patrick, and 39 flower arrangements, and the rest of them are donations. This is excluding what Marty's gonna be able to get us from the school. He's doing his best. So right now I have it set about a $2,400 profit. We need to get that number up closer to 3, or I'd like to shoot for 6, but maybe that's asking for too much. But there are a whole bunch of people that put $100 cash donation down here. Only thing for those people that didn't, that actually did order a couple flower arrangements and put 2 next to it or whatever, just make sure the profit on those flower arrangements are $10 each. So if you can make the cash donation for the difference in that particular instance, it would be $80. So adjust it to whatever your order is, and we'll go from there. Delivery date will be the first Wednesday in December, and we need to have the orders for the flowers, and I assume the same for the popcorn, Patrick, by next Wednesday, so we can allow for a 2-week turnaround. So that is where we're at. One other thing is tomorrow night, Terry, I don't know if you got a communication on the district gala up on the east side of Cleveland. I think it's in
Oh,
Benner or
I
Willoughby.
did, and I didn't bring that up. Yeah.
Okay, I will be there to help set up as the incoming new district treasurer, Lottie Da. So it is tomorrow, I think, starts at 5 to 5:30. But if you have more information on that, you may want to say that to the group. So that's that with the fall fundraiser. Thank you for your participation. But like I said, I started a second page last night. And if you could, if you haven't put down your name yet, just put it on the second page.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Rich. Ed's going to talk to us a minute about Santa in the cabin this year.
We have a almost full sign-up sheet. We do need somebody to be passing out tickets on Saturday morning, the December 2nd. We generally get there between 7:30 and 7:45. The tickets go quickly. We will be at the gazebo again for ticket pass out, but the event itself will be held at the Scout Cabin. So we need somebody to help with that. We also need help with the tear down. And that's at 3 o'clock, and that's pretty quick. The people that are working on that shift, that last shift, help us load the cars up, and we take it back over to the Scout headquarters for storage. So that's the type of thing that we're looking for there. The other thing, tragically, again, there was a horrible accident that most of you have seen in regards to Tusky Valley. Please keep that community in your thoughts and prayers. They were headed to Columbus for a performance, and it is unimaginable in regards to what they're going through. So please do that.
Okay. Thank you, Ed. One other thing too, first off, we do have a foundation meeting after today's meeting, correct? So all members are invited to attend, and of course the board members for the foundation. The 28th, since we're not going to have a meeting next week, the 28th of November is Giving Tuesday. And so I'll forward out this email about Giving Tuesday. It's to donate to the annual fund share on Giving Tuesday, which supports the district and global grants. Okay, so I'll send some more information out on that, either I or Marilyn. Okay, with that, I am going to hand the meeting over to Marty. There you go. Thank you. You first. I'm taking your mic from you. It's like a tragedy.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Brittany Amier. I am one of the service learning teachers. And before I introduce the lovely Kylie, I just want to let everyone know that we will be starting our policy projects here soon. So for those of you who have been to our policy projects before, it's an instance for our students to solve problems, to solve issues that they might see at the state level, at the local level, and then at the Hudson City Schools level. Specifically, usually the high school is where our high schoolers focus on. And so our students do a presentation, they come up with a solution to the problem, and that includes how do you actually make that happen? And then they take questions. And it's a really good experience for our kids to not only identify places where they feel like they can help, but also actively look into coming up with ways to solve those problems. It gives them a chance to be creative. It gives them a chance to kind of stretch themselves beyond what we normally ask them to do kind of in the classroom. So Marty and I have been kind of talking about the schedule for that. We should hopefully be getting our schedule from the school in the next couple of days sometime. Yeah, Marty's very excited for the schedule. Next day or two, and then we'll be able to send that out to everyone. And we would love it if you would be able to come and listen to the students present and just give your opinion and perspective on the solutions that they've come up with. And when you get the invitation, it will also have the topic that the students will be presenting on. So you don't necessarily have to pick state, local, or Hudson City Schools. You'll have a topic for it. And so with that in mind, I would like to introduce Miss Kylie Kelsch to speak for you today.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kylie. I'm a part of Service Learning, and I'm currently working at Access Women's Shelter in Akron. Access's job is to help women attain permanent housing. And I go there every Wednesday, and I usually start my day off by helping organize and sort through donations. And then I also work in the boutique where the women are allowed to shop for free after visiting with their case managers. And I really enjoy helping the women pick out clothes and jewelry that I think would fit them the best. So I kind of have built relationships through that. And then my favorite part of working at Access is helping in the kitchen with our chef, Miss Kat. We spend a lot of time talking and joking around while we're helping prepare and serve lunches. And we've quickly become besties. So that's one of my favorite parts. I recently helped with their fundraising event for the shelter. It was a adult spelling bee, and that was at House 330 in Akron, and I really enjoyed that. I got to meet a lot of new people there too as well. And yeah, we're working on a holiday party right now for the women. They will be able to get their nails done and have a nice Christmas meal. And then they'll have movies for the children, and that's going to be really exciting. So I'm really excited to keep volunteering there. And yeah, after high school, I plan on attending Montana State University. Some of you may be wondering why I go to a random college across the country. And to that, I say you should go visit Montana because it's beautiful and I love it there. That's also where my mom went to college. So yeah, I plan to study psychology and then pursue a degree in that field. So yeah.
Well, hello, good morning, Rotarians. Right, absolutely lovely to see you this beautiful morning. Hope gobble your Thanksgivings go well. Basically, before I introduce our next student, just another update. So last Wednesday, Hudson Community First really did a wonderful thing. They brought in from Washington University in St. Louis, Dr. Tim Bono, who psychologist, and wrote a book on happiness. And a number of our students attended in the morning. They got up early in the morning, attended. He also did a presentation at Hudson Montessori and WRA as well. And it was great information. And what it presented to many of the students was about the dangers of spending too much time on their social media and on their cell phones, and the value of actual interpersonal relationships. And specifically with Thanksgiving coming up next week, the value of gratitude, and how they need to train their brains to be more grateful and see what's positive among them. I had a lot of students who said anecdotally to us how wonderful the presentation was and how needed it was. So it was great Hudson Community First doing that to improve student mental health all throughout Hudson at all their different schools. So with that, I'm going to introduce our last student for today, and that is Sam.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Sam Andrews, and I'd like to just talk about my site and my experience with service learning so far. So for this first semester, I've been serving at a new site for service learning, which is called Grace House Akron. Grace House Akron is essentially a hospice home for indigent, unhoused individuals in the North Hill, Akron, Greater Summit County area. And so we provide these unhoused or terminally ill individuals with a place to pass on at the end of their life, with a stress-free, no-cost environment. And so that's a service that we provide. For me, I've been spending a lot of time writing their grants. I've been doing a lot of grant writing, a lot of annual fund management, sitting in on a lot of meetings, helping out with website development. A lot of that goes into the business side of the organization. For me, when I started there, I was a little uncomfortable with the idea of serving at a hospice home. I think that it's really easy to kind of disconnect yourself from the idea of death, since it seems so far in the future. And I didn't know how to relate to people that were residents there. And a big area of growth I've seen for myself is being able to talk to these people and really connect to them and hear their story and be able to connect with somebody that I don't have much in common with. And my favorite thing so far there has been on off days where we don't have much work to do. I've gotten the opportunity to cook for some of the residents, make their lunch, make their breakfast, go bring it to them. And it's nice to see, a smile on their face when that happens. So that's been one of my favorite things so far. And looking to the future, I'm hoping to study 4 years bachelor's degree in environmental and field biology in preparation for an environmental law career. So I'm hoping to attend law school, and that's my experience so far.
Well, thank you again for having us this morning, and look forward to those sign up geniuses for the policy projects. And also shortly thereafter, English will be sending out for their RAK projects as well. Thank you.
Thanks so much. What was the name of your place again?
Access Women's Shelter.
Women's Shelter. Okay, thanks. Okay. Thank you, guys. We love having you here, and you both sound like you are on track to be very successful. Dave is going to introduce our speaker then.
Thank you, President Terry. Good morning, fellow Rotarians and guests. Today, we are continuing our series, paying tribute and giving thanks to our veterans. Today, it is my honor and distinct pleasure to introduce Kevin Hemel. Kevin is the historian for Arlington National Cemetery. He's going to be joining us via Zoom. He is, as I said, the historian for the Arlington National Cemetery, one of America's most hallowed places. He records events, ceremonies, and funeral services for future records. Some of his articles have been reposted in the U.S. Army and Department of Defense websites, and he is also the historian and tour guide for Ambrose Historical Tours and leads World War II European tours on D-Day and the battlefields commanded by General George S. Patton. He is the author of several books, including Patton's War, An American General's Combat Leadership, Volumes 1 and 2, Patton's Photographs, and Patton, Legendary World War II Commander. He has served as the research director for Sovereign Media, which publishes World War II history and World War II quarterly magazines. He continues to write articles for those publications, and is a former historian for the U.S. Army's Combat Studies Institute, where he wrote about small unit combat in Afghanistan. He has appeared on the History Channel, the American Heroes Channel, the Science Channel, C-SPAN, and Book TV, speaking about General Patton and military history. He's worked for more than 20 years for various military and military history magazines and journals, and has worked as a researcher for the National Archives and as historian for the U.S. Air Force. He holds a master's degree in history from Villanova University, and I believe Mr. Hemel is ready to join us via Zoom. Mr. Hemel.
Hi, can you hear me and see me okay?
Yes, thank you.
Fantastic. Good morning, everybody. I got to say, very impressed with those young people that you had on stage earlier. That was a very, I appreciate being a part of that and listening to what they've achieved. That was great. So I'm going to share my screen right now. Let's see here. We'll get started. Can you see that? Did the first screen pop up? Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the history of Arlington National Cemetery. I've been working here for the last 5 years as an historian. Arlington National Cemetery, we are about 1 square mile in length and width. We have about, I think, 400,000 people buried here, and we average about 20 to 30 funerals a day. So I'm going to go back in time and tell you about the origins. In fact, here, we'll just advance the screen. I'll tell you about the origins of the cemetery dating back to the Civil War, how it expanded after the Spanish-American War, the funeral of John F. Kennedy and how that changed the cemetery, and then finally the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. So, and then I'll be happy to take any questions. So Arlington National Cemetery really gets its start with George Washington Parke Custis. This is President George Washington's adopted son and Martha Washington's grandson. He built this house on top of what was called Arlington Heights in the early 1800s, and his objective or his goal was to create a monument to his adopted father, George Washington. This was to be the Washington Monument. However, he was not a great businessman. He would often give away artifacts about his adopted father to visitors, and it just never really came into fruition. In 1831, his daughter is going to marry a young West Point graduate, an Army officer named Robert E. Lee. The house will stay in her possession. It'll be referred to as the Custis Lee Mansion. A lot of people mistakenly say that Robert E. Lee owned the house. He never really did. He's going to have to move out in 1861 when he tosses his lot in with the Confederacy. And you can see there in the photograph, those are Union soldiers on the front portico. It was important for the Union Army to take over this area because, as I mentioned, it was up on a hill. And if you could haul artillery up to that hill, you'd be able to fire down into Washington, D.C. So that was immediately occupied. And in those early days of the war, the Union generals that took over the area would write letters to Robert E. Lee because they had gone to school with him and knew him from the Army. And they would tell him, listen, everything in your house is being well cared for. Don't worry. That's going to deteriorate as the war goes on. But yeah, so it's in April of 1861 that the country is going to go to war. And as the war goes on, the Army of the Potomac, the Union Army of the North in this area, is going to be overwhelmed with casualties. And slowly the Soldiers National Cemetery in Northeast DC and the cemetery in Alexandria, both military cemeteries, are going to fill up pretty quickly. So in 1864, with the hospitals packed, the Union Army is looking for different venues of where they can bury their soldiers. Now remember, in 1864, Grant is going to start what's called the Overland Campaign. And this is going to be a series of very brutal battles with Robert E. Lee as he kind of tries to push his way down to Richmond. So the casualties are going to surge in this area. So as a solution, Montgomery Meigs, the Union Quartermaster General, is going to allow for a burial to be done in the Arlington Heights area. The first soldier is William Chrisman. He does not see battle. He dies of disease. He contracts mumps and eventually develops what's called peritonitis, which is a swelling of the abdomen, and that will cost him his life. And so he is the first person buried here. He is from the 67th Pennsylvania. And that number 19 on his headstone, that's simply a record number for record keeping. That's why the 19 is there. He will soon be joined by other soldiers filling up the area there. That's Montgomery Meigs. And the popular story is that he ordered that the bodies be buried right up to Robert E. Lee's doorstep so that Lee could never move back, because he was so angry with Lee for turning his back on his country. Unfortunately, the evidence doesn't really point to that. He does call for the burials near the house, but he never specifically says for that reason. And now you can see what is now called Section 13 was referred to as the Field of Dead. So this is where they're starting to bury the remains of people from both combat and disease during the war. And then if you look at that color photograph on the lower left, that is taken from what we call today Arlington House. And that is taken from basically the front portico of Arlington House. So you can see the graves coming right up to the house. And then behind them, there's a path and there's a garden behind that. That was Mrs. Lee's personal garden. So that is pretty much most of the Civil War. Now, after the war, this is the tomb of the Civil War unknown soldier. And it's not the same as what we think about when we think of the tomb of the unknown soldiers here at Arlington Cemetery. This one's different. When the war ended in 1865, the Federal Army sent teams to basically comb over all the battlefields between Washington, D.C. and Richmond and remove all the remains and the body parts that they find, both Union and Confederate. And they're buried in this crypt under the ground. The underground chamber was actually divided into parts where they would put different remains like skulls and rib cages and femurs and things like that. And they calculated that it was the remains of about 2,111 souls that had fought in the war. You can see those cannons placed with their front, buried into the ground. Two of those cannons actually used to stand on top of it, crossed in front of each other. But that was eventually removed because it was warping the crypt right there. In the background, you can actually see on the left, that is actually Arlington House itself. And then to the right is a little portico. And a number of these were built by Montgomery Meigs after the war. And what he would do is he would take federal buildings that were being demolished and take the columns from them to build a lot of the structures here at Arlington Cemetery. So next, Arlington Cemetery is really kind of considered a pauper's cemetery. This is for families that can't afford to have their sons or husbands moved back to their states and to their neighborhoods. And so it's really kind of looked down upon as a pauper's grave. But it's going to change in 1888 when Phil Sheridan is buried there. Sheridan had been a cavalry commander and eventually Army commander during the Civil War. He made a famous attack, I think it was during the Battle of Cedar Creek, that a song was made out of about him riding his horse and getting closer to the battlefield. By the way, his horse was named Renzi, and that horse was stuffed and is now at the Smithsonian Museum of American History, if you'd ever like to go see it. Anyways, Sheridan decides to be buried at Arlington Cemetery, and that really kind of changes the way people view it. It's now kind of becoming a place of honor. Another change that comes with his burial, he's going to be buried with his wife and children, and that is the first time someone's been buried as a family. The people that were buried at Arlington up to this point had been individuals. So from this point on, officers who pass away, they will also have their spouses or children buried with them. Enlisted men are not allowed to have that. It's not going to be until 1908 that the cemetery will allow for family members of enlisted men to be buried in that manner. So that's going to be another large change for the cemetery. Now we're going to fast forward. Although that, in fact, there is Sheridan's headstone. You know, a lot of people ask us, you know, why do some people have large headstones and some have that sort of uniform pill kind of headstone? And the answer is really money. Some families could afford more elaborate headstones, others could not. And it wasn't until about 2005 that the cemetery changed its policy to only allow those uniform headstones that, that people know so well today. The only exception are people that are killed in a group, like a helicopter crash or a plane crash. There you'll see a large headstone with numerous names. But you can see Phil Sheridan's family definitely was able to, I guess, honor him with a larger headstone. We're going to advance now to the Spanish-American War. This is the USS Maine that blows up basically in Havana Harbor in Cuba in February of 1889. And about 250 Americans, both sailors, Marines, and some craftsmen, are killed in the explosion. 72 of them will be disinterred from this watery grave and brought to Arlington Cemetery. They were unidentified. And so that is the only time actually a group of unidentified service members was buried at the cemetery, as well as their burial. In fact, in the shadow of their burial is conducted in the shadow of the mast of the Maine. So this is the front mast of the Maine. It was brought here. It actually laid on the ground for a couple of years because they were trying to design the cemetery to give it a more powerful effect. And they were waiting for the completion of what's called the Memorial Amphitheater, which is a very large amphitheater you might recognize from Memorial Day events or Veterans Day events when the president lays a wreath and gives a speech. So when they finally do erect this in 1915, they make it as a tribute to all the sailors and Marines on board. And so the base of that memorial is really shaped like a turret that you would see on a battleship back in the turn of the century. And you really can't see it, but the names of everybody who were on the USS Maine is on that turret. Give me 1 second here. Incidentally, this is the front or main mast. The stern mast is actually at the Naval Academy in Annapolis. And so the Navy likes to say that the USS Maine is the longest ship in the US Navy. Now, the cemetery is going to expand. I mentioned the mast of the Maine. And then the real large addition to the cemetery is going to be the Memorial Amphitheater. It is going to be completed 5 years after the mast of the Maine in 1920. And you can see from this aerial view, if you look at the Memorial Amphitheater, and if you follow it up to the right a little bit, you can see the mast of the Maine kind of comes off the road. And if you look at the columned entrance, today that is where the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier is. But back in 1920, there was nothing there. It was just an open view of the city of Washington, D.C. And that this entire area today is now covered with headstones. Oh, I should mention that it was dedicated, the actual headstone or the cornerstone for the Memorial Amphitheater was laid in 1920 by President Woodrow Wilson. And then it's finally going to be completed, I guess, and dedicated in 1920. And that is when 1921 is when we'll have the burials of the unknowns. But I'll get into that in a little bit at the end of the speech. So the next big element that changes Arlington National Cemetery is the death of President John F. Kennedy. His burial 3 days after his assassination on November 25th, 1963, is really going to be a national event. There are only 3 network television stations in the country. 2 of them cover the funeral. About 95% of all TV owners in the United States watch the president's funeral, and they really see the dignity and the pomp and the military ceremonies that take place. You can see that, you know, how elaborate this is, bringing the president. He was laid in state in the Capitol Dome, brought to a church for the funeral, and then brought to Arlington National Cemetery. So Americans see this, and suddenly, Arlington is now where I want to be buried. It takes on a completely different feel to it. And this becomes really, this is the last cornerstone that makes Arlington Cemetery the premier cemetery in the United States. I should mention, I'll get to that when I get to the next slide. And the average of people visiting Arlington Cemetery was about 2 million. After John F. Kennedy is buried here, it swells to 7 million. So his death and his burial have a profound effect on the cemetery. This is the Eternal Flame, where John F. Kennedy, his wife Jacqueline, and their 2 infants are buried. The Eternal Flame itself was requested by Jacqueline Kennedy. It was done about 24 hours before the funeral. Everybody assumed John F. Kennedy would be buried in Boston, but it was the Secretary of Defense, Frank McNamara, that stresses to Jackie Kennedy that he really should be buried at a place where all of the country could see him. And so she agrees, has him buried here. But in 1961, she and the president went to Paris, and they went to the Arc de Triomphe, where the French unknown soldier is buried. And there she saw the Eternal Flame under the Arc de Triomphe. And so that was in her mind. And so 24 hours before the funeral, she requested that an Eternal Flame be at JFK's gravesite. This request actually came in on a Sunday. Army engineers were contacted over at Fort Myer, which is connected to the cemetery. They actually had to go through yellow pages calling different gas companies in Maryland and Virginia until they found one in Rockville where the gentleman agreed that he thought he could put something together in 24 hours. And sure enough, they were able to manage it, and she lit the flame. There's a lot of anecdotes since the funeral about the flame going out. There was an incident where a group of nuns from Boston came down to pay tribute to the president and poured holy water and put out the flame. But now the system that we have, there's about 100 jets in there. That flame is not going out in the heaviest storm. Okay, the last part I want to talk about now is the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. And just for basic purposes, that large block of marble, the World War I unknown is not buried in there. He's buried underneath that. He was buried in 1921. That slab was placed there in 1938. And then if you look in front of the World War I, if you look at the plaza, you see those 3 white rectangles on the ground. So if you look at them, the one on the left is the unknown from the Korean War. The one in the center is the unknown from World War II. And the one on the right is empty, and that is a tribute to all that fought in Vietnam, or Southeast Asia, to be more accurate. And I'll explain that in a second. The World War I unknown was buried on November 11th, 1921. In fact, the United States struggled with how do we honor, the dead from World War I? We don't, they're all overseas, what exactly should we do? And so people were sending in ideas to the Secretary of War, as it was called at the time, to, maybe do a forest of trees in Washington, D.C. with a tree representing each casualty, or, carve John J. Pershing on a stone somewhere, possibly in Georgia. And it was really the British and the French that came up with the idea in 1920 of selecting one unknown soldier from multiple cemeteries and then choosing one and having them buried and having that unknown represent all the unknown from the war. So we mirrored that idea. We removed, we disinterred the remains of 4 different unknowns from 4 different American cemeteries in France and Belgium. We had an American sergeant pick one by laying white roses on the casket. They brought all 4 into a room in a place called Charlon, where he picked one out. That unknown soldier was basically saluted and given military honors in France, transported across the Atlantic on the USS Olympia, which is actually in dock up in Philadelphia, still exists. And the burial took place November 11th, 1921. You can see the Army chaplain with his hand raised over the crypt. I believe, I'm not sure of that, I believe he's sprinkling dirt from France onto the casket, because we do know that soil from France was part of the ceremony. If you look at the gentleman sort of directly south of the headstone with his hat off, that is General John J. Pershing. He commanded all the troops in Europe, known as the AEF, American Expeditionary Forces. And if you sort of followed everyone down over to the left, you'll see sort of like second to the last guy on the left is wearing feathers. That is Chief Plentycou. The French government specifically requested that a Native American be part of the ceremony. So they included him. He had been a scout for the U.S. Army in his younger days. And when he went up to, let's say, a prayer at the unknown soldier, he actually took off his war bonnet and laid it down as a dedication to the unknown soldier, and also laid down his coup stick. Both of those, his war bonnet and the coup stick, are on display here at Arlington Cemetery in the Memorial Amphitheater. So for World War II, the plan was to select an unknown from both the Pacific and the European theaters and conduct the funeral in 1950. But as a lot of you know, in 1950, the Korean War breaks out. So it had to be delayed till 1958. And it was a combined ceremony for the unknown of World War II and the unknown from the Korean War. That's President Dwight D. Eisenhower at the unknown soldier of World War II. He represented the family for the funeral. He accepted the Congressional Medal of Honor. Every unknown soldier is given the Congressional Medal of Honor because we don't know what their service was, so we give them our highest award. Richard Nixon, who was vice president at the time, he represented the family for the Korean War unknown. So this ceremony took place May 28th, 1958. Now, I had mentioned the empty crypt for Vietnam. With the Vietnam War, science had advanced so well that the scientists who were trying to identify missing and unknown soldiers basically informed different administrations that they felt like with enough time, they would identify everyone from the Vietnam War. When the Carter administration looked into having an unknown for Vietnam, they basically settled by, they presented a bronze plaque remembering everyone who served in Southeast Asia. President Ronald Reagan, however, felt that the ceremony of a funeral for an unknown soldier would help bring closure in the United States. So they basically contacted the lab in Hawaii and said, give us whatever unknown soldier you have. There were several protests about this, but the burial did take place in 1982. But then the DoD kept looking into this and finally realized that there was a pretty good chance that the soldier buried in the Vietnam crypt was actually a first lieutenant named Michael Blassie, whose plane had gone down in 1972. His body, the remains were disinterred in 1998. He was positively identified. His family chose to have him buried at what's called the Jackson Barracks Cemetery in St. Louis, Missouri. So that is why the Vietnam crypt is empty and dedicated to all who fought in Vietnam, or in Southeast Asia, I should say. Now, finally, what I would like to talk about are the tomb guards that guard the unknown soldier 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. They stand for 1 hour shifts, marching back and forth, guarding the tomb of the unknowns. They do everything in the count of 21. So they will take 21 steps, pause for 21 seconds, turn. So everything's done in a mark of 21. This is considered a very high prestige job in the U.S. Army. The soldier you're looking at here, if you look at the bottom, I guess for us left, but it's on his pocket on his right side, is that silver badge. That is a tomb badge. So when you become a tomb guard, as you're working the job, you take a number of tests on comportment, history, care of your uniform. And if you pass all those tests, you earn a tomb badge. And the sort of the honor that you get is you're no longer called a tomb guard. You are now a sentinel. So that is something very well sought after. So sometimes you'll see a tomb guard with that badge, sometimes without. So you'll know the difference is one is a sentinel, the other is a guard. I should also mention that tomb guards. Now, the soldier on the left is a tomb guard. The soldier on the right is a sergeant of the guard. So he oversees the changing of the guard, which takes place every hour at the tomb. During the summertime, it's done every half hour. But the guard, the one on the right, I'm sorry, the one on the left, never wears his rank or her rank when guarding the tomb. The idea is that they never want to outrank the unknown soldier, because we don't know what rank the unknown soldier was, so they never wear rank. When they relieve the guard that is on duty, the sergeant or officer, it's done by both, they will inspect their arm and their uniform, I should say arms, their rifle and their uniform before they are allowed to go on duty. And that's something that a lot of people come to the cemetery to see, is the changing of the guard. And then the last thing I'll say about the guard, they always carry their rifle. They always shoulder their rifle to the outside of the tomb, because they are guarding the tomb. And that's why when they change directions on their march, they will also change the shoulder in which they're marching with the rifle. So, and like I said, they are out there 24/7 in all kinds of weather. We recently had a tomb guard become a little bit famous because while that guard was marching, a rainstorm, a freak storm came in and almost knocked them off their feet. But someone made a video of it that went viral, and people were going online saying, you know, this soldier knows what he's doing. This soldier, he has the honor that it takes. Well, it was actually a woman soldier doing it. And I was able to interview her, and she said not only did she almost get knocked off her feet from the wind, but the rain was coming in sideways and speckled her glasses, and she was basically marching her post blind. But she said it was a great honor to do it. Every guard who does it, really aspires to this job. It's taken very seriously, and it's something we're very proud of here at Arlington National Cemetery. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions. While I hit stop sharing, and we can all see each other. Well, I thought that would do it.
Good morning. Thank you for your presentation. We appreciate it. On the guards of the unknown soldier guards, are they do they have live ammunition? Are they there to actually guard if someone was to come and try to vandalize or do some sort of mischief?
Sure. So the rifle is not loaded. The bayonet is very sharp. During the changing of the guard, the officer or NCO that comes out for the change wears a pistol that is loaded. In fact, the hand grip of it is got wooden panels, and those are actually from the USS Olympia, the ship that brought the unknown soldier over. From time to time, you ask about mischief. Some people do sort of go past the barriers of where they should be. I was President one, and the guard will stop whatever he's doing and march very aggressively towards that person and order them to step back. I've never seen anybody challenge that. In fact, the time that I saw it, when you see those kind of things, your immediate reaction is, come on, man, have some respect. But what happened the time I saw it was the gentleman did not speak English, and his young son was on the other side of the plaza. And so he was reacting to go to his son. And so usually when those things are done, it's very innocently. There was only one incident in the history of the tomb, to my knowledge, where somebody really did make a threat. I think it was 1975 that a gentleman showed up and drew a pistol on the guard. The guards that were in the tomb quarters saw this on the TV screen, came out, and were able to talk the man down and eventually remove the pistol from him. And it turned out that he was a Vietnam veteran suffering very, very bad PTSD, and was, I guess, I can't put it lightly, he was suicidal, but he wanted someone else to do it. And so they were able to talk to him and get into some counseling. I think he was a car dealer down in Virginia. And so that's been the only real dangerous situation. But normally people adhere to the rules and listen to the guards when they speak.
I should point out, I have no plans to,
And man, I'll sleep a little bit better tonight. Thank you very much.
I have a question, but I have to preface it with the reason for the question, and that my family and I had gone to visit the Kennedy tomb and the rest of the cemetery. And this was probably in the early 70s. And we got locked in the cemetery. And we couldn't find any way to find a guard or anybody outside to let us out. So we were thinking we were going to be camping in Arlington National Cemetery for the night. And we went around the periphery to see if we could find somebody and we found one guard, but he didn't have a key. So my question is, do you have an SOP these days for either monitoring the cemetery to be sure there are people not getting locked in, or is there some other mechanism that people, of course, we didn't have cell phones then, so we couldn't, call 911, but anyway, it was an interesting challenge.
So yes, the cemetery is very well monitored these days with cameras. There are still guards. Obviously, there's always the tomb guard marching back and forth in front of the unknown soldier, but there are other entrances and exit points of the cemetery. So when they close that big front gate, you're not sealed in. And so if you move around a bit, people are going to see you on those TV screens. Someone will come to you and get you out safely.
Thank you for your presentation.
And I'm glad you made it out.
I have a couple
Oh,
of questions.
thank you.
In terms of the building itself, the original home, what's it being used for now?
So it is a museum. The cemetery, Arlington National Cemetery, is technically an Army post, but Arlington House is the possession of and under the control of the National Park Service. So there are park rangers there that provide the history, and you can walk through, and there's still furniture and paintings on the wall from the 1800s, and they'll give you the story of both the Custis Lee families and the history of the area.
The second question. Lee went on after the Civil War to become president of Washington Lee University.
Correct.
The records show that he ever went back and visited that place again after the war?
He never did return. The only incident I know of, he was taking a train up north somewhere and looked out the window and saw Arlington Cemetery and made some comment about how, it looked beautiful or something like that.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You got it.
Just going to turn this around.
Oh boy, here comes the history.
Hello, thank you for being here this morning. Appreciate the presentation. I have two questions as well. The first one, just kind of informational. I was there probably about 20 years ago, and I vaguely remember, do the guards have to memorize the cemetery so that so if there's a family member says, I'm looking for so-and-so, that they will be able to identify what section they're in?
No, the soldiers do have to memorize a lot of the history of the cemetery. But as for all the locations, that is really something that when people enter the cemetery, I don't know about 20 years ago, but you go through metal detectors, and there's a number of staff people at an information desk, and you kind of ask, hey, I want to visit so-and-so, and they'll look it up there and give you direction. We also have an app that you can put on your phone, the ANC app, that provides you all kinds of information. And it has what's called Find a Grave. So you can basically type someone's name in, and it'll not only tell you where they're buried, but give you a map and a direction how to get there. So the guards, I rarely ask these days about those kind of questions, but we have specific staff members for that.
And second question is, when I teach the 60s, I remember encountering this once in an article, and I don't know if you know more about it, that there was a controversy when Bobby Kennedy was going to be buried, that Johnson was blocking it because he'd never had military background. And it became an issue about Bobby Kennedy being interred because obviously they had a lot of conflict. I don't know if you know anything about that, about Bobby Kennedy's burial.
well, I know about the conflict with LBJ, but Bobby Kennedy served in the United States Navy in World War II. He was actually in PT boat training when the war ended. He was hoping to sort of follow his brother Jack. So he did serve. You know, I guess everybody considers him the Attorney General, and that's why he was buried there. But he had World War II service like his brothers Joe and Jack. And I don't know about the controversy with LBJ. I do know that there was no love lost between the two of them.
Hi, thank you so much again. This was super interesting. I teach with Marty who just asked the question, but I was kind of curious about the amphitheater itself. What was kind of the impetus for putting an amphitheater in a cemetery?
So we actually had a very small amphitheater built right after the Civil War by Montgomery Meigs. People would come on Decoration Day, which is now Memorial Day, to the cemetery to decorate graves, and then they would have a speaker at we call it today the Tanner Amphitheater, but the small amphitheater. And as that became sort of a national holiday, more and more people were coming to the cemetery and gathering at the amphitheater, and it was realized it was just too small. And so it was actually Union Army veterans. The Union group was called the GAR, the Grand Army of the Republic, GAR, yes. And it was basically a big lobbying group of veterans. And they went to Congress and said, we want something bigger so that we can hold these, you know, Memorial Day events. And then eventually, of course, we get Veterans Day and all major holidays. There's something that occurs there. So that was the real impetus. There was a small one. People gathered for Remembrance Day, Memorial Day, and it turned out to be too small. So they had the larger one built. They didn't build it with any idea about unknown soldiers. It was really for Memorial Day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You said that the cemetery is about 1 mile square.
Yes.
How much space is left? Not to be morbid, but I'm wondering, we hear an awful lot about national cemeteries being built in other parts of the country.
Correct. You know, like all cemeteries, it does fill up, but there have been a number of expansions to the cemetery to make it possible for the cemetery to last longer and longer. We had a millennial expansion in the north where we created another columbarium so that people could be inurned, not just buried, and that saves a lot of space. And right now we are working on what's called the southern expansion. I don't know if any of you are familiar with the Air Force Memorial, but we're taking over the land there to extend the life of the cemetery. Olivia, do you know what the prediction is for how long the cemetery is going to?
Getting it to up to 150 years, but it should be well into the future, further than 2060.
Yeah, so we're hoping to continue to have people buried here up to 2060.
One comment real quickly. Yesterday afternoon, students from our middle school 8th grade class were at the cemetery. I have some wonderful photos taken by my grandson. Thank you for giving them that opportunity.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad that they came to the cemetery. I think it's something everybody should come see, although I guess I'm biased.
All right, thank you so much. This was a great presentation.
Well, thank you, and thank you for having me. And I want to give a shout out to Olivia, who's off screen, who's been helping me with all this and who coordinated it. So there we go.
Thank you, Olivia.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Have a great day, everyone.
You too. You too. All right. Dave, would you like to come and pull? We have $9 in our Rotabuck today. Well, how about one of the kids? Yeah, let's have here. How about, come on, one of you come up and pull the Rotabuck for us. I'll meet you. This is our big money day here. $9 is a lot. Here, go ahead. and read.
Just read the number. Okay. 924533.
Thanks. 533, Ms. Barker, it's your day. Okay, maybe it's gonna be a big day. Here's your big winnings. Okay. All right, ready? Got a black marble in there. Oh, not today, but we're getting down there. All right. So thank you, everybody, for being here, and thank you to our students. We always enjoy you. You guys are great. You represent Hudson well. So go out there, make it a great day, everybody. Where's my, oh.